Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's first in a series of webinars on the new Supply Chain Management Readiness Benchmarking Assessment. We appreciate you taking the time to attend today's webinar on building and evolving resilient enterprise, and we hope that your family and you are healthy and safe. This is, again, the first of a series of webinars. This will focus on an introduction to our readiness assessment. Our next webinar on June 29th will focus on our best-in-class rankings for this readiness assessment. Then the Tier 3 will be next with the supply chain industry benchmark comparison and process improvement prioritization for your company. And then we'll get into Tier 4, which is the supply chain management readiness playbook for your company, and webinar 5, which will be a capstone webinar on case studies and best practices. Again, we look forward to an interactive webinar, and in the chat box, you see the pollev.com, Greg Slagle 910 link. Please click on that link and join us in the browser to participate in the polling questions. Your feedback during the webinar is critical for our succender. Again, my name is Jim DeVries, founder, president of Enhanced International Group. I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have from Uphaven, Jenny Fromm, Claire Finch, Connor Fincham, Cindy from the South Africa. And again, joining me today is Greg Schlegel. He will be sharing his vast experiences. Greg is the original founder of Supply Chain Risk Management Resiliency and former president of Apex and ACM. Greg, a few words.
Jim, thanks. Am I coming through okay? Because I was blasted off. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot for attending. Thanks, Jim. I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. I've taught supply chain risk management at Lehigh University for about 10 years, and I still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University. I spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and practice lead. I'm a 30-year supply chain exec veteran for several Fortune 100s. I taught SCM at 6 different universities and was president of Apex, now ACM, ASCM, back in the late 90s. So thanks.
There's some background noise. If you could put your on mute, we would appreciate it. If everybody could place their, not sure where that's coming from.
Yeah, Jim, I don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, there we go. It's just everybody place their on mute. That'll do it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So Greg, this is your intro slide.
Oh, okay. Yep. Just to follow up, I gave you a thumbnail sketch of who Greg is, but this is the consortium. We're about 30 companies, 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the world. We operate in 23 countries. These companies who you see on the right bring tools, techniques, and methodologies and solutions to help us as a consortium identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. It's all we do. What do we provide on the left? Online education. We have 2 courses. We can talk more about that later. We do virtual training like we're doing right now. We do about 3 to 4 webinars per month, once a week over the last 24 months. We used to do classroom training. Remember that? Remember when we used to have face-to-face? We used to do 25 workshops around the globe with event planners. Hopefully that will come back to fruition. We have our own certificates and certifications in supply chain risk management. We also support other companies, organizations, certificates. We do awareness, mitigation. We bring supply chain risk and resiliency best practices. from our book. We coach companies on this journey. We build out supply chain risk war rooms. We again have enterprise supply chain risk solution folks in the mix. And today we want to talk about our newest online supply chain management readiness assessment tool. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just a bit of introduction for EIG. Enhanced International Group is an exchange of passionate experts to guide transformations, to provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have vetted over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers that are clear thought leaders focusing on enabling your enterprise. And EIG acts as that master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We operate like a Swiss Army knife. We will find you the best provider for your needs. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Reviewing this bicycle slide, and it aligns quite well with supply chain risk and resiliency. We start by recognizing the supply chain is an ecosystem. We have all heard about the saying that we are only as strong as our weakest link, very much aligned to supply chain. And we take it a step further by saying, in the analogy of the dry pedal wheel representing the strategy of the company and how we get there through execution, the execution wheel presented as a real wheel, and then the tactics to get you there through the chain. One strong pedal from the strategy is going to result in many execution cycles. Therefore, the drive chain are the tactics that keep the momentum going so that we can get there that we're setting out to. The strongest link strategy execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for your company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So let's get moving. All right, so this is the first of webinars. It's really an introduction webinar to the supply chain management readiness assessment that the consortium has built over the last 10 years and have had many cycles, especially in those classroom trainings. So this is a very practiced assessment. So we'll give you an introduction to the assessment today's webinar, and then following up at the end of June, we'll get into the best in class perspective of the benchmark assessment. And then we'll get into how do you use this to benchmark comparison within your industry and how to really drive it and link it to prioritizing improvements in your company. And then webinar 4 is about building that playbook for your company, using this as a guide. And then the 5th webinar in September, end of September, will be looking at the benefits, case studies, and building readiness for your company. So this is a cookbook approach to transforming your company's supply chain management strategies. So again, these are the tiers that we just discussed, tier 1 through 4. Again, we'll be focusing on tier 1. And just to be clear, the tier 1 is free. Anybody can go online, and we'll be showing that link at the end of the webinar. With that, we have background noise again. With that, tier 1 supply chain readiness assessment, the insights and deliverables. So some of the insights are, where are our strongest and weakest parts of our company by looking at the spider diagram on the left. How and why do perceptions differ? So if you fill it out across your company, maybe people have different perspectives of that. What does this mean in terms of your supply chain maturity? The rings are on the left are the green. Inner ring is best in class. So the closer you are to the center, the better you're performing. The yellow is that middle ring, which is, you're on your way. And then the red ring is getting started. So if you're outside the red ring, that's mean you're getting started. And there's 13 tenets here. And we'll go through those tenets in a few minutes. So some of the deliverables, of course, it provides you where you're at today and provides direction of where you want to go in there. And we'll be getting into this a lot more as we go through the webinar. With that, we would like you to rank where you're most closely aligned to. We have identified a number of different areas in the polling. So we would ask if you would fill in the poll. We'll come back to this. We'll leave this poll open. It looks like right now the other is there. So I have to look in the chat. I'm not sure I see much in the chat right now on other industries outside of the, so we'll look to the industrials and the CPG, electronics and chemicals for now. So we'll keep looking at this and we'll come back to this slide. We have corporate training in the chat, so thank you for putting that in. So we view that as education, and that's excellent. Thank you for sharing with us. And again, this will be open for the first few minutes, and we'll come back to it when we get to the case studies that we'll share. With that, we'll get to the agenda. So we're going to start with the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness, then supply chain readiness background and development, the supply chain readiness definitions, the 13 tenets, and then we'll get into the case studies, which are aligned to this that survey on pollev.com that's in the chat. Please do join and answer that polling question of where you are at, what industry you'd like to focus on, and then the next one is on the agenda is mature supply chain and mature supply chain processes to ensure your survivability. We'll provide some insights there, and then how to get started. So with that, we'll get started. Compelling reasons to promote the supply chain readiness. So the latest buzz on the street. So there's a lot of buzz on the street, supply chain. It's pretty interesting to Greg and I. When we, a couple of years ago, when we started doing these webinars, that we had a number of folks hearing the word supply chain, but now you hear supply chain, front page news, it's becoming everybody's vocabulary. But when you ask the C-suites what their top concerns are at the beginning of this year, interesting enough, they're most concerned with broken supply chains, and we're seeing this in delayed shipments around the world, and it's going to be a while before things settle out. So those lead times for products coming in is getting longer and longer, and sometimes there's shortages and there's overages. We're living all those different issues, and then of course we're having trouble with hiring workers and managed IT networks. So all in all, a bit of a challenge. But we like what Alex Partners said. The C-suite is a bundle of nerves this winter. Again, this was done in January. A new survey shows that 72% of CEOs are worried about losing their jobs in 2022 because of business disruptions, tracking closely with the 94% of bosses who say their corporate models need to be overhauled within 3 years. So that's big news, so to speak, that for the first time in these type of surveys, supply chain comes out on top, and supply chain is a major issue. So where do you start? Well, you got to start building your supply chains from the ground up and rebuild them with the new norm, which we're yet to see what that is. With that, Greg will give us some benefits. Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We thought we'd share a few third-party benefits of improving supply chain management process maturity. This comes from Bain, the global consultancy. Just left to right a couple of statistics. Accelerating revenue growth, sure, 40 to 60% decrease in product development cycle. You can achieve 15 to 25% increase in your facility output. In the middle, improve your customer satisfaction, anywhere from 20 to 40% of an increase in perfect order rate on time and in full, 20 to 30% improvement in customer satisfaction. That means enhancing your revenue growth as well. On the moving to the right, you can increase savings and cash flow. Folks have seen 1 to 2% lower operating expenses, 10 to 20% lower transportation costs, and 10 to 40% increase in inventory turnover. So that's real money, that's real savings. And then finally, on the far right, they also talk about minimizing risk and increasing resiliency, which we've been talking about for the last 10 years. There's a big, robust discussion right now out on the internet with workshop attendees and with clients. And the robust discussion is supply chain efficiency versus supply chain effectiveness, which is really risk management and resiliency. So some pretty heady, pretty compelling bottom line impacts all the way around as you improve your supply chain management process maturity. So with that, we'll move to the next one. In our 10 years of utilizing this tool, which we're going to talk about throughout the webinar, a few top motivations come to mind. Number one, you can use this, use the supply chain in the manufacturing operations to create winning strategies, of course, and we'll dig into several of these during the workshop. Second, takes a holistic approach to transforming your supply chain from an end-to-end value that's associated with the 13 tenets. Third, you can transform manufacturing processes for better productivity. You saw some of those data points from Bain. Number four, you can boost operational health by identifying skill gaps and building capabilities within those 13 tenets. Number five, fosters an image of your as-is capabilities today to provide you a roadmap for achieving competitive advantage, like and achieving some of the stats you saw from Bain. Number six, confirm your supply chain processes are at least at a minimum level of maturity. What does that look like? And to be able to leverage maybe digital and autonomous supply chain opportunities going forward. And finally, we've come to the conclusion that the tool looking at supply chain process maturity and improving those processes gets you prepared for what we call the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. Next. And finally, it does enhance and help you build a resilient enterprise. What do we mean by resilient enterprise? This is a definition we like. It's in our book, and I'll go through it real quick. It's a resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of its customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. And I'll be honest with you folks, that's a pretty tall order. It really is. But it's really the why in our point of view. It's the why would you spend any time improving your supply chain processes and improving your risk management. It's the why in terms of why you would spend time and money exercising this type of tool and improving your supply chain processes to build out a more resilient enterprise. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. And with that, we'll get started on the supply chain readiness background development. And we'll start that with this famous diagram of supply chain management landscape, where we start with from the upper left down to the bottom right. And it really walks us through from new product design and engineering all the way through the customer. And so if we start in the upper left, you have new product design and engineering. Of course, you're developing your new products with marketing. And then you get into whatever you design and engineer. The supplier management and purchasing then gets involved. And to buy the different raw materials that you need to feed into your product and to get it to your facility, you need some logistics and production planning and scheduling to get it there. So that's your inbound process for your materials. And as you move to that middle tier there, you then have inventory of your different raw materials and components coming into your facilities to support your production. And then you get into production and monitoring and reporting. And then when you have your finished goods, you're then moving it out through distribution. And then, of course, you're getting into the management of decision support. And then you're out to your customer. And then you're back to sales and marketing, full circle from your marketing in the beginning. Now you're marketing what you're actually made, and you're getting it out to your customers. So that's your end-to-end supply chain management landscape. So it is as you would do in a score model or show in a score model, it's plan, source, make, deliver, and there are some returns, unfortunately, in there. But that's the landscape we're talking about when we're talking about supply chain management. With that, Greg, the genesis of this tool.
You bet. We thought we'd give you a quick glimpse of the genesis of the tool. You can see the tool on the left just as an illustration, but it was born out of the first of a kind MBA, Supply Chain Risk Management course at Lehigh University here in the States in Pennsylvania. And it was so well received going through several classroom years of classes that we actually built it out and took it on the road. A tool's been operating in certain different levels of sophistication for about 10 years since that first MBA course. We've utilized it in the classrooms, workshops, webinars, and with clients. We not only have several tiers, but we have several different versions associated with the tool based on the type of complexion of the engagement. We've now upgraded the basic tool within what we call an LMS, a learning management system platform. And as Jim mentioned, we've talked about it, we've now developed within the tool 4 different tiers of sophistication and deliverables. So with that, we'll go to the next one. What we have here is an activity profile of the SCM assessment tool. On the left, you basically see a profile of the questions that are in the tool. They're normally 3 different snippets, we call them. And within those snippets of a particular area, this one just happens to be agility and disruptive innovation, we then ask you to decide which best depicts your as-is condition associated with that question. And you render an opinion, pick a snippet, and then we ask you to enter a level of degree. And you can see the numbers as well. So every tenet is built like this. There's about 92 to 95 questions, I believe. And then secondarily, over 500 MBA students in 2 universities have gone through the tool in its various forms. We've educated over 3,000 operations and supply chain professionals over the last 10 years with the tool as well. It also has resonated with over 200 financial risk professionals, meaning folks in insurance and banking. We've done that. And then we've also used it in different companies across multiple industries to get a sense of their as-is condition relative to their end-to-end supply chain. So with that, we'll move into a final slide, I believe, in this section. A somewhat painful acknowledgement by Jim and I, who have been in this business now for 12 years. After years of supply chain risk and resilience work, witnessing company outcomes from our newest SCRM assessment tool, which is a different tool that looks at risk maturity, risk appetite, and operational propensity. That's a different approach, different perspective. We've come to this conclusion. Not many companies are ready for a bona fide supply chain risk and resiliency journey. Many companies still have disjointed and siloed supply chains. They don't talk to each other department by department. Many companies don't maintain supply chain excellence in all of our 13 tenets. So therefore, we built out our assessment tool to act as a primer to do two things. Enhance supply chain process maturity, because it is a maturity model. When you see the as is, there's also a forward-looking thread to help you at least give you a sense of what you might do if you want to improve that particular tenet, and secondarily to get companies better prepared to engage in a bona fide supply chain risk and resiliency journey. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great, thanks, Greg. And with that, we have a second survey here. Hopefully you were able to fill out the first survey, so thank you for doing that. We'll be reviewing those results shortly. We would like to get your feedback on when did you or your organization last perform a supply chain management assessment? Did you do it within the last year, 1 to 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, or maybe D, you never performed one at all? So which of those 4 choices that best represents for you and your experience in doing these type of assessments? We'd love to get your feedback to get a better complexion of where you're coming from. So as we walk through the slides, we can better attune to your needs. Greg, any other additional thoughts?
Just, it says, the screen I'm looking at, Jim says the poll is locked.
Oh boy. Okay.
I'm not sure if it's you or me, but.
All right, well. Let me see.
Just.
Maybe try now. Yeah, I can't get in it either. We got another technical problem. All right, so let me see if I can unlock it here. Let's try now. It's me. Somehow I locked it. So, but I was able to unlock it. So folks, please go ahead and respond. Love to get your feedback here. And while we're doing that, I think I'm going to scroll back. Well, I can't scroll back to the previous, then it will come up.
There we go. We got one result. Maybe hit responses. There's one result I see at the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
Less than 1 year. There we go. Give folks a chance. Never performed a supply chain assessment. Okay. Some honesty. We appreciate that. All right. So
again, no right or wrong answer, folks, but we were curious.
We're kind of curious on the complexion. So I apologize for my snafu there of unlocking that. I love technology. Greg does too.
I don't touch it.
All right. So we have some notes in the chat. Let's see what's in the chat. Let's see. I see some C's and D's. Thank you for taking the time to enter it into the chat. So we have more than 2 years and never performed one. So thank you for responding in the chat to help us move forward. So it looks like we have a splattering of everybody, a little bit of everything about performing
Okay.
assessments.
Good.
Well, with that, we'll move on to the definitions, because we, as Greg showed, discussed before, we have 13 tenets that in the assessment. So we'll just briefly go through those 13 tenets, and we have both from a manufacturing and a services perspective. We'll start with the services. And the first three are centered at more at the strategic level. And the first tenet is leadership, the culture of your leadership, who's leading you, and the tenor of your company. The second is a balanced scorecard, the 4 perspectives of a balanced scorecard that many of you are familiar with, and then the intentional redundancies. Do you have an overtly develop your alternative sources of supply? So those are the first 3 areas. And then the next group of areas, more into tactical, is demand management. How do you manage demand and your customer base? And then you get into industry best practices, the type of industry do you operate in, and then information systems, IT. What's your infrastructure look like? And then integrated supply chain. Do you take an end-to-end viewpoint of the supply chain? And then risk mitigation planning. And how do you look at risk? So that's a little precursor of the risk mitigation of supply chain risk management, but obviously we can do that in supply chain management also. And then we get more at the day-to-day level and the operational level that you may see at a facility, your supply and purchasing, S&OP, sales and operation planning, then your adaptive manufacturing, how mature are your manufacturing processes? Are they, and then you get into logistics transport. How do you manage your logistics, your carrier management and so forth? And then agility, how agile is your entire enterprise? So that gives you a taste of the 13 tenets of the assessment. Greg, do you want to chime in on any of these or that we covered?
No, it's our point of view, folks. All right. You may not totally be aligned or agree, but over our, 30, 40 years of experience in supply chain and risk, this to us as a consortium tends to be the key elements of supply chain management maturity. So just to let you know, our point of view.
Thanks. And Greg, from a service perspective, lead us through.
Yeah, as mentioned in the consortium intro, the consortium maintains 2 supply chain management assessment tools to support 2 different types of online supply chain risk and resiliency courses that are culminate in a certificate. But from a service point of view, we have a secondary tool. All right. And just from a definition, from ASCM's point of view, this comes out of ASCM dictionary. What is the definition of a service industry? They talk about it in its narrowest sense. It's an organization that provides an intangible product like medical or legal services and on and on. In its broadest sense, it's all organizations except farming, mining, and manufacturing. And you all can see some of the additional types of service industries that we attempt to support in terms of online course supported by an online assessment tool. So let's take a look at our focus. We have been focusing in the service arena on public healthcare supply chains. And again, from an ASCM point of view, public healthcare normally under the guise of non-governmental organization, which is affectionately known as NGOs. They're a legally constituted organization that operates independently from any government. You can see the definition of an NGO from the ASCM dictionary on the left-hand side, just to give you a flavor of how complex the public healthcare supply chain is around the globe. As you can see on the left-hand side, the y-axis, the landscape is pretty deep. International folks, national, then regional, then district, then city and town, then small town and rural community, all the way down to the bottom, which is the patient. And on the top x-axis, you can see it gets complex as well because there are three arenas: the private sector, the public sector in the middle, and then the NGO sector. So it is deep and it is wide, and that's what compelled us to take the baseline data assessment from manufacturing and rearrange it to help public healthcare and service organizations improve their supply chain processes. So we have another one, another slide, I believe. And we just wanted to follow up on the two different types of tenets. Jim mentioned and went through the 13 basic tenets for manufacturing. From a service sector point of view, they're pretty much the same. Some in the tenets have some additional little tweaks and nuances, but the one that is really totally changed and aligned to service organizations is the 9th tenet, which is supply chain processes. And that is not really manufacturing, but essentially it looks at your end-to-end supply chain processes. So with that, we have focused on the supply chain processes for the service organization, and again, supporting the end-to-end approach in terms of folks who don't manufacture products and services. So with that, I'll give it back to Jim.
Great. And so we'll get into the case studies next. And we have a number of case studies ready to go. And we're going to reference the survey results. So we'll go back to the survey results, drum roll, and it looks like we have at least a number of responses here. And we have industrials is number one. We have others in the chat. And I believe when I looked in the chat, a lot of those were education, healthcare, education and healthcare were the ones that were in there. So we'll take those on and to light, but maybe we focused on industrials and chemicals for our case studies, Greg, and we'll move to that section. So we do have case studies built for this. We have the CPG, we have the electronics, we have industrials and chemicals and healthcare. So we do have those built here as part of this. And these are some of the comments that the folks have taken the assessment, have provided. Since industrials came up, there was one heavy industry and aerospace defensive executive says, your assessment tool was the most complete supply chain management assessment method I've seen to date. And he's been around for 40 plus years. So that was a very big compliment. So we thank him for that. And then from a chemicals perspective, a VP of supply chain commented the supply chain readiness is a critical success factor in our industry. Before the assessment tool, we felt we had a fairly robust supply chain management approach. The tool was terrific wake-up call for our supply chain team. So it gives you a couple of testimonials in the two areas that you prioritized, but you can see the other ones. So pretty good feedback. People like the tool. It's not overly complex, but you know, people could argue, does it take 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours to fill out? I think it's up to you and your team, but it's free. It's online for single users. So you can give it a spin and see how you like it yourself. With that, we're going to move to industrials. So the industrials, Greg will bring us through the results of where we're at with the assessment results.
Okay. Yeah. These again, we're we're trying to be flexible and agile here. We're kind of dancing on our feet. This the chart on the left is an actual feedback from a heavy industrial user. You can see that again, the green, the orange, and the red. There's the 13 tenets. They're a manufacturer. Pretty good looking graph as it relates to the maturity and the risk factors. From a tier one, we call it best in class segmentation. When you add up all the numbers, we essentially attempt to give that particular company a rating. You're either leader, mainstream, apprentice, or ring of fire, as Jim mentioned. I believe the number was 4.3 for this particular company, which kind of gets them in the leader position. We also take a look at strategic, tactical, and operational. Those are color coded. I'm not sure if Jim mentioned that, but we also take a look at the 13 tenets and categorize them. And the blue is strategic. I believe the red is tactical, and the orange or light green are operational. And then what we do is we take the outcome of the assessment and essentially codify where the strengths of that company as we see them. And in this particular case, the strength of this company was in the operational tenets, 3.7, you can see. And remember, now in this tool, the lower the number, the stronger the tenet when it gets to strategic, tactical, and operational. So their operational quotient was 3.7, their tactical 4.6, and strategic 4.8. And remember, in the chart, the farther away you are from the center, the higher the number and the less mature your processes are. So it's kind of like inversely proportional, but we wanted to share that with you in terms of what the heavy industry graph looked like, and then give you some more perspective that you get at tier one from filling out the survey. All right.
And then if you were to go to the tier three, the industry benchmark, we would benchmark you. And for this particular benchmark at this time, and of course, benchmarks change over time as you get more data. But right now, leaders are between 3.1 and 4.6. And so this overall score of 3.7 or 4.3, I should say, it gets you at barely into the leader position for this particular company. So just a little added color in there that we do industry benchmarking for the assessment, and that is a tier 3 offering. Greg, some recaps?
Yeah, sure. On this particular company, we kind of put together what we call a persona and an action plan. As you can see, the persona basically recaps and says, all right, yeah, you seem to be, on that emerging leader arena. Your strength is operational. And essentially from a benchmarking industry point of view, you're touching the leadership position. So all good. And then an action plan coming out of that persona and assessment could be focusing more on your forward-looking issues, meaning what do you do next? Because your strength is operational. Maybe you want to shore up strategic and tactical areas. Maybe you want to embrace new methodologies for enterprise-wide supply chain risk and resilience. Maybe you're ready. All right. Enhance your leadership skills, maybe throughout the organization. And maybe you want to develop some new key risk indicators. So when you're in this position, from our point of view, in this persona, relative to your supply chain maturity process, you're in a good way, a good shape to potentially exercise the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. So just wanted to give you that kind of recap from the chart and the data. Jim?
Great. So with that, I think we're just going to move on. We got through at least one of the assessments, and we're going to move through the next area and talk about mature supply chain processes and to ensure survivability. With that, we'll start it off with the Gartner 4-blocker that they developed back in 2018, and we found it pretty relevant here. And it has performance on the y-axis and importance on the x-axis, low to high on both axes, pretty typical 4-blocker. And in the upper right is what they identified was where you want to start. So this is your high impact, high performance, where you want to get started. So of course, we always want to start with the customer, meet and exceed the customer expectations. That's where we always have to keep that in mind in our supply chains. If we're not doing that, we got to fix that first, as well as reducing supply chain costs and improve business processes. So that's the evolve area. The second one that they identified was the improve area. So that's more foundational, managing supply chain management risk, supply chain innovation, and making sure you have your talent in your organization. The third area that they identified was then somewhat in the middle of enhancing your supply chain, increasing transparency, helping supply chain, helping to drive growth and profitability. One of my favorite topics, but it is something that you need to be a little bit more mature to be able to gain margin growth through your supply chain and drive that supply chain agility and adaptability. So it is very important that you do these things in the right order. Sometimes the flavor of the month or what you see in Harvard Business Review or in the front page is focused on enhancement when you haven't really focused on evolving or improving your supply chain. And you're really getting ahead of yourself if you haven't done the evolve and improve areas first. With that, Greg has a great case study.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We wanted to inject another real world example of the use of the tool, and we profile Zara. Many of you hopefully might know Zara, the retail giant. Zara over the last 10 years has been in the Gartner supply chain top 25 along with Masters. If you aren't aware of the Gartner top 25, you might want to subscribe or keep a lookout because they've done it for, the last 15 years at least. And the report is pretty compelling. Zara's been there. A little quick look, a historical look back in 2011. Zara was 19th out of 25 worldwide organizations. In 2019, as you can see in the chart, they came up to number 2. Good for them. And then recently in 2021, they're back to about 13. So we wanted to give you a sense of an exemplar. We consider them an exemplar in both supply chain management and supply risk or supply chain risk management. So we have a few more salient statistics to show you. Again, Zara back in 2015, we ran through the assessment of the tool, and this is a picture image of Zara's 13 processes back in 2015. They were operating very closely to an exemplar. You can see that many of their tenets were close, either inside or close to the green circle, which is where the exemplars operate. One outlier, as you can see, was Info Systems. And at that time in 2015, that's why we give you the profile of them relative to Gartner's top 25. They had over 25 1970-like systems supporting their organization, and they were still beating the pants off of their nearest competitor in terms of supply chain methodology, supply chain performance, and risk management. So that was their as is. All right. What did they do? Because of their innovation, their agile, and their adaptability, they took a vast amount of free cash. We haven't talked too much about it, but they had a lot of free cash in 2015. Why? Because they had a cash conversion cycle rate of minus 45 days. What does that mean? That means they're a bank. That means they get money from their customers almost 90 days before they have to pay for raw material to their suppliers. They were a bank. They took that money, they improved their supply chain processes and their risk management, and they went and built a multi-million-dollar supply chain risk management war room, which we'll show you in a second. Up on the top is the picture image of their supply chain risk management war room. They run it 24/7, 365 days. They have not enlightened us as to where it is. Little levity there, but they have it, and they monitor their supply chain throughout the entire globe 24/7. What does that mean? Well, that means Xera is resilient. They're very good at resiliency, and they're getting better every day. They've decreased their inventory. They've reduced their obsolescent inventory. They have the highest margins in retail apparel. Why? They operate a supply chain war room. They identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks in their supply chain very quickly. They essentially have been in the Gartner ranking for over 10 years. They have information technology now, 5G technology and more, supporting good supply chain management practices and good SCRM practices. So net for Xera, they remain agile, flexible. They view risk as an opportunity. They drive innovation to make informed risk-taking decisions. They leverage risk as a competitive advantage, and every company in their sector is trying to replicate what Xera does. They are an exemplar. Let's take a look at the last slide. We're watching our time. From a readiness value proposition point of view from the tool, essentially these can be achieved as you enhance your supply chain maturity. We've seen it. We showed you some third-party data. We've seen it as well over the last 40 years. What can you achieve? You can achieve cost advantage. You can increase your revenue. You can improve your cash flow like Xera did. You can increase your throughput in your supply chain. And the tool provides those building blocks to survive and thrive in what we call the VUCA world. If you're not familiar with VUCA, we stand by it. It's our supply chain landscape right now. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's what we're living with every day in the global supply chain. And from a business sector point of view and supply chain risk, the improvement of your supply chain processes will lead to getting better end-to-end supply chain visibility for you. You can execute actionable activities. You can position your team to reduce yearly supply chain risk and resiliency out-of-pocket money to the tune, folks, of $3 to $4 million US a year. That's what the landscape says. We have several statistics. One is you're probably going to witness 11 to 12 disruptions in your supply chain per year. That relates to $350,000 US per disruption. That relates to $3 to $4 million that you have to find from your treasury in your own pocket to keep you to survive and thrive in a VUCA world. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great. Thanks, Greg. With that, we're going to wrap it up on how to get started. with the supply chain readiness assessment. As we've shown before, it's free. And we covered the insights at the beginning of the webinar and some of the deliverables again that we have. So we have this placard here on how to, it will help you get started, understand where you're at, help you on your journey going forward. And it's free. So at the bottom here, you see the link. We will supply the link to all the participants and registrants. We'll be sending that out shortly. And we look forward to your feedback and questions. Of course, if you're filling out the survey, you can contact us anytime if you have questions. With that, some helpful hints. You know, pick a company or a product line that's familiar with you, log in and enter that product line into the system. Tell the system whether you're a manufacturing or service provider. Walk through the 92 questions by yourself or with your team, better yet. And then when complete, hit the submit and you'll have access to the chart and answers, and there'll be a report there. So it's online, it's free, it's for you all, so to speak. And we look forward to your feedback on the survey and any questions that you may have. With that, again, this is the first of 4 tiers. If you want more insights, we do offer those in a best-in-class ranking benchmark for your organization. And then, as we mentioned before, with the industry benchmark, if you want to understand where you are at in your industry, every industry is different from a maturity perspective. We definitely will provide you insights there. And with all these tier 2, 3, there is coaching involved and insights and consulting for those tiers. And with that, Greg, some final takeaways?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of quick takeaways. Again, we'll reiterate, the tool is available. It's free. We've kind of given you some insights. We'll send you the URL as soon as we can. If you go through the tool, contact us anytime regarding the tool or the results. Let us know how you felt about the process, who you collaborated with to answer the questions. If you had any surprises, and if so, what were those surprises? And feel free to hit our website. Those are, you can see our email addresses down in the bottom right. So with that, we thank you for attending. Hope to see you at our second webinar covering tier 2 capabilities. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Again, as Greg said, our tier 2 is on June 29th, and our tier 2 is the end of July, and then the end of August, and our capstone at the end of September. So we look forward to you joining this webinar series, and any feedback that you have between the webinars, please do reach out. We appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Greg, some final words?
Again, appreciate the time. We're excited about this primer, which is Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment. Again, we've built out multiple tiers, tier 2, 3, and 4, which get real busy in terms of insights, capabilities, and assessments. So we appreciate your time, and feel free to reach out, and we will follow up with the URL, and look forward to seeing you at our second webinar. Thanks a lot.